June 17th will mark the 50th anniversary of the Watergate break-in.
Yeah, CBS 17's Russ Bowen is here now with us. And Russ, you sat down with North Carolina's former Attorney General who played a huge role in the Watergate hearings. This is a fascinating story to me. It's almost unbelievable that it's been 50 years.
It is hard to believe. Rufus Edmisten became a crucial player in those hearings early in his career as an attorney, and so did the North Carolina senator who led that investigation.
That was one of the committee members, Senator Norway.
5 decades ago, a young lawyer from the Appalachian Mountains found himself in the middle of what would change the course of American history. Rufus Edmisten would go on to become North Carolina's Attorney General and Secretary of State. He recalls the words of John Dean, Richard Nixon's counsel, that would eventually bring down the President of the United States.
As the President discussed the present status of the situation, I told him that all I'd been able to do was to contain the case and assist in keeping it out of the White House.
John Dean had just testified before the committee for 3 days saying that the President was up into his eyebrows in the Watergate thing. And of course, from the White House, they said, no, he's a liar, he's crazy, no such thing. Nixon had just won a landslide election in 1972. And the discovery of those tapes would tell whether or not John Dean was telling the truth.
North Carolina's U.S. Senator Sam Ervin was the chairman of the Senate Watergate Committee and chose Rufus Edmisten to be his deputy chief counsel. The committee was investigating the break-in of the DNC headquarters in the Watergate office building and any involvement Nixon may have had in it. After John Dean's testimony, Senator Ervin said, "We need to first ask the president if he will give us the tapes." There was a bit of humor in that very serious moment.
All of a sudden, he turned to me and said, "Rufus, go get the president on the phone." Sort of like, go get a loaf of bread. I thought, well, okay. And I knew the number to the White House, and I rang it up. And Miss Rosemary Wood answered the phone because I knew this number went to her. She was the president's secretary. And I said, "Ms. Wood, this is Deputy Chief Counsel Rufus Edmisten of the Watergate Committee, and Senator Ervin would like to speak to the president." And she said, "Well, hold on, I'll be back." And all of a sudden, this voice comes on the telephone. "Senator, this is Richard Nixon." I thought, my God, I didn't expect the president. And for some unconscious, crazy reason, I blurted out, "Mr. President, the senator wants to get you on the phone." Oh, my gosh, I thought I will never get over this as long as I live.
Nixon did not agree to release the tapes.
Within about 10 minutes, the committee decided by a vote that they would subpoena the President of the United States for the first time in history from a committee of the Congress.
And it was Edmisten who hand-delivered that subpoena.
And I did a little tricky thing that day, a little mischief in me, I guess. I had one of those little pocket-sized constitutions, about this big in my hip pocket. And when I delivered the subpoena, I just sort of automatically reached in my back pocket and pulled out that Constitution and said, "I've heard it said that you need one of those down here, too."
It took a unanimous decision by the U.S. Supreme Court to get the tapes released. They revealed Nixon approved of the break-in and conspired to cover it up. They also exposed just how far Nixon was willing to go.
If you could really dig down deep in Nixon's mind and say, okay, what is it that you crave and like about public life so much that if he were to tell the truth, he'd say, "I get to punish my enemies." That's throughout the tapes. It was throughout the Watergate hearings, his enemies list, and the press was his most hated enemy.
Part of Nixon's problem, Edmisten believes, was those who were around him. In the end, 48 people involved in the Watergate scandal were convicted. Nixon was told by fellow Republicans he would be impeached and convicted. To avoid that, Nixon resigned.
And they gave him the worst advice that could ever be to any president. If he, in the early stages, if he'd gone before the American public and said, "Look, I got some folks who did some very stupid things. I want to apologize for it." The American people are very forgiving. He might have survived and probably would have gone down as one of the better presidents. He probably would have survived were it not for the stupidity of those surrounding him.
And
Wow.
guys, Edmiston is going to go to D.C. next week for the 50th anniversary. He mentioned that so many of those who were part of that investigation no longer with us. So, of course, it's very good to hear the stories from those who are still here.
I mean, Russ,
Fascinating.
I bet you could sit down and talk to him for days on end. Just absolutely fascinating on the history there. Now, does he have anything to do with January 6th? Does he have thoughts on that, or is he a part of any of the investigations going on there?
Yeah, well, he did talk in depth about the comparison between the January 6th committee of today and the Watergate committee of the early 70s, and he has a very interesting perspective of that, and we're going to play that for you tomorrow.
Oh, looking forward
Wow.
to it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Great story, Russ. Appreciate it.